Hello and welcome to the Draft Talk podcast, a very special edition of the Draft Talk podcast. We're back talking all things NFL draft, and for the first time ever, not only are we on your classic audio podcast, but we're also on YouTube as a video. So if you haven't already, do check that out. Search 99 Yards on YouTube, and the Draft Talk podcast will be there at the top. It's a new feature, so if you could like it, give it a subscribe, that'd be fantastic. I'm your host for this very special edition, Brian, and joining us is two of our top Draft Talk scouts. It's Owen and Stu. How are you doing, guys?
Yeah, all very well on video for the first time. So we'll see how this goes, shall we? But yeah, a few weeks into the season now, we're starting to get the lay of the land a bit of more of an understanding for this draft class, and looking forward to see if me and Stu agree or not.
Yeah, well, wonders never cease. It might happen that we do agree. Looking forward to this, particularly on the video podcast. Had my hair done specially for tonight as well, so we'll look forward to seeing how that turns out. It's interesting just to see how things have panned out after the first few weeks of the college season, particularly as we had some thoughts pre-season, and I'm not sure our thoughts are where they were on some of these positions, so it's been interesting to see how things are panning out so far.
Absolutely, yes, and it's a wonderful time of the year. Everywhere you look, there's football, so we thought we'd get right involved with another Draft Talk podcast. As you mentioned, we did a season preview a few weeks ago, running through the top prospects. Do check that out if you haven't already. Very informative. And we're about a week off the midpoint of the college football season. So I wanted to have a quick discussion, see how the guys are doing for this year's draft class. So let's get cracking. And why not? Let's start with the quarterbacks. We said pre-season there's 5 or 6 that we reckon could go in the first round. Of those, quite a few very early. So give us a lay of land. How are the quarterbacks looking? Are they living up to your pre-season expectation?
No is the easy answer.
Yeah, I'm looking at Wayne, and if you've seen it on the podcast, we're both smiling to each other, and we were maybe a bit jumping the gun pre-season, weren't we?
I think we said that there was potential. There was plenty of players who weren't there yet, but had the opportunity to take that next step. The problem is a lot of them just haven't. A lot of them look the same as they did last year. Some of them look worse than they did last year. And when you're betting on traits early on in the process, it just hasn't worked out that way so far. I mean, we've still got plenty of time to go. A lot of these players will be able to turn it around. But I think there's just a lot of players who we expected would take the jump, would come out and be first-round picks, who maybe would be better off going back to school rather than entering. The top 2 are still the top 2. CJ Stroud from Ohio State is still, for me, the clear number 1, and has only edged further ahead. Bryce Young has been very good as well. He's been extremely clutch during plays. He's bailed Alabama out a couple of times, especially the game against Texas. You know, he put the game on his back and went downfield and won that game for them. He's currently day-to-day with a shoulder injury, which is pretty good news. On Saturday, they were reporting that it could potentially be season-ending. So the fact that he is day-to-day is very promising and good that we're going to be able to see him going forward. I'll let Stu touch on a couple of the others, but a few of the other guys like Will Levis, like Anthony Richardson that we mentioned, just haven't taken the next step that I think we expected them to.
You mentioned one of the quarterbacks there, Will Levis. Will Levis scares me a little bit. I mean, he's got all the physical traits and upside that you could want. There's loads of scouts have been out watching Will Levis over the last few weeks. He's got one of the strongest arms out there, velocity-wise. He's got good confidence in himself, put it that way, but he makes these decisions. His decision-making at times is questionable. He's not that poised within the pocket. He tends to sometimes panic a little bit under pressure and things as well. Turnovers are an issue with him. And when I say he scares me, it's not that I don't think he's got the traits. I think a lot of people are going to look at him and see, oh, he looks like Josh Allen a little bit. Josh Allen looked like this coming out of college. We can easily make a Josh Allen out of this. When you look at Josh Allen coming out of college and the type of player he was and what he's become now, it's really an anomaly. It doesn't happen very often, and trying to bet on a one-off becoming a two-off, that's where Levis really scares me.
Yeah, when you talk about these traitsy players that come out, like Josh Allen, a bit like Patrick Mahomes in a way as well, where you're betting on they had elite traits. Now, Will Levis is very good, but I'm not sure you'd go as far as saying kind of the arm strength is very good, bordering on great, but it's not elite like Josh Allen's was, and definitely not like Patrick Mahomes was. I think his decision making is just absolutely awful. I would use the word inconsistent to put it nicely. And like Stu, in my notes, I've got that we've become obsessed with these toolsy players who could be the next Josh Allen, but Will Levis just screams the type of player that you would bet on those traits, and then he's going to get a coaching staff fired because he needs to learn. It's all upstairs with him. The football IQ needs to become better. The decision making needs to become better. His accuracy needs to become better. He's just extremely careless with the football. And I do think some of his mechanics are inconsistent as well, which may be some of the interceptions he's throwing that he can be off base sometimes. So he has a lot to work on. Another player that has a lot to work on as well that we spoke a lot about pre-season is now Anthony Richardson from Florida. That he's a kind of a dual threat, can do everything with his legs and has great arm strength. This season he showed his legs, but he just hasn't been able to be consistent or accurate, do really anything with his arm. So he's one of those. Ultimately, he's going to be too raw and probably could do with going back for a year and continuing to develop because he's got time, he's got traits. He just needs to develop and maybe get in a system where he's got some people to throw to and he's got some weapons where. He's not just having to do it with his legs all the time.
You mentioned inconsistency with Will Levis, and I think that's just what we see with Anthony Richardson at the moment. He was a week 1 Heisman Trophy winner, and by week 2 he was getting binned and nobody liked him. So, I mean, he's still young and he is relatively inexperienced. He hasn't played a lot of high-level football, and he can be wildly inaccurate and really erratic at times. But then he had the game against Tennessee when he had 453 yards, 2 touchdowns, and looked pretty good as well. I think what you're going to see this season is a lot of ups and downs. But I think playing through that and working through that, and you're right, I think that if he can work through some of the issues that he has, and it is a lot down to inexperience, that he might just be one of those guys, do you know what, I'm not going to be above CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Why not come back to school and be the number 1 pick the next year if he can, because he's got all the traits, if he works at it, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that could happen. And he does have time on his side. He's only 20. So I think we maybe just need to slam the brakes a little bit on Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, he just needs to play and get some more games and some more reps. And the problem is, I think if he did declare and he went to the NFL, he's going to be one of those players that we talk about. He needs to sit a year. He doesn't need to sit a year. He needs to get some more games, and college is going to be his best bet for doing that. There's probably a couple of new names, I would guess. Well, not new names, old names to the list of quarterbacks, which we will be discussing about. One of them is Hendon Hooker. He is the quarterback for Tennessee. Played extremely well this season. People talking about him being a top 5 quarterback. Some people even saying that he could be a top 3 quarterback. Just looks really polished. He's got really good physical traits. He reads the game really well. There's not a lot not to like. He's been fantastic. The problem is he does turn 25 in January, and so if you're a college quarterback who is about to turn 25, I would expect you to be reading the game well. I would expect you to be making the right decisions. I would expect you to be accurate, and you should be looking like you are bigger, better than everyone else on the field. I would expect that's what you should be doing at that age as a 5th or in some of these cases a 6th year player. So he is a player that's going to be spoken a lot about. I wouldn't be going near him in the first round simply because of that age. In terms of like if we're betting on now, where does he end up? I don't think he would be a first round player. If he was maybe 21, we would maybe be thinking about it. But at the age of 25, he would need to step in. That means he's going to be basically the same age as Lamar Jackson entering his rookie year. So it will be a problem. You may be looking at one of those people the teams take a flyer on maybe in the late second or into the third, like we've seen with Davis Mills, who can get them through a year.
Yeah, I mean, he's emerged really well, and I think that the age thing is going to play on him. You know, how much more is there for him to grow? You know, he's had 6 years at college, more or less now, and he's good, but is he got much room to grow beyond being what he is? Yes, NFL coaching will get that, but you'd expect someone, if they were really top notch, and they're not going to be a college quarterback at 25. He's maybe just a late bloomer, but he's had a very good season. Teams will like that, and he's got good leadership qualities. He'd be a good guy to have around an organization. And hey, if it doesn't, there's nothing wrong with being a career backup. You know, if that was what someone becomes,
Absolutely.
Look at the money some of these guys like your Chase Daniels and what have made being a good back. And if that's what he becomes, fair play to him. But he's really emerged this year and has shown what he has to offer.
You can basically copy and paste exactly what we said there about Hendon Hooker to the BYU quarterback, Jaron Hall, who we know BYU quarterbacks, we've seen it with Zach Wilson, that he's one that's actually been out on a missionary and come back. So he also will be turning 25, but basically copy and paste. He's had some unbelievable throws. He's looked really good. So he's one that would maybe be in a very similar kind of discussion and tier when it comes to the quarterback. One final name I will mention, is Michael Penix from who just transferred to Washington. He was at Indiana beforehand, and he's a player who seems to have been in college forever. So he was at Indiana, moves over to Washington in the offseason, and has just gone about his business really nicely. A player that has the tools. Draft fans have fallen for him before because he has all the tools. His problem has been injuries. It's killed his career up until this point, and let's be honest, it's killed his draft stock as well. 2 torn ACLs, a clavicle injury, and a shoulder joint issue. Good luck drafting that if that's what you want to do. But it's really nice to see him putting a year together finally.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Penix has been one of the guys who has really stepped up this year. He's leading, or was at one point leading college in all passing yards. A decent clip of 9.7 per attempt as well. He played really well against Michigan State. I think that was his kind of coming out game this year. He's shown a little bit more than he did previously at Indiana. He's able to move a little bit better than he's not a running quarterback by any stretch of imagination, but on the kind of rollout and boot legs, he's been a bit more movement, and he's got a nice velocity and touch to his passing. And it's good to see that he has hopefully put some of that injuries behind him and goes on to have a nice run at the college football anyway, just to see where it can take him. Last name I'm going to throw out there is a guy that I really like, and that's Cam Ward, who's from Washington State Cougars. He's a guy who transferred from the University of the Incarnate Word, if anyone's ever heard of that university. But he was the best freshman in the FCS in 2020. He's very talented. He's got a really nice release. He has that ability to change the arm angle. You've seen the guys like Mahomes and whatnot do. He can throw on the run. He's really untapped potential for me. He stepped up really well, taking that step at Washington State. I think he's a riser in this draft. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he races ahead of some of the other guys if he keeps playing the way he is. The guys who are falling, like Richardson, Levis, Cam Ward's a name to look out for that could go above those guys.
Yeah, and he's got them winning games, right? They're on the verge of being ranked in the AP top 25 poll, which says everything, because a team like Washington State doesn't happen to them very often.
Good stuff. So some hot shots to look for there, but like I say, pre-season we said maybe 5 or 6 in the top round. We're not so sure about now. Maybe 3 or 4, or you never know with quarterback.
Yeah, you never know. I would maybe edge on maybe 4, just maybe not as high as we thought. So you're going to have the 2 go really high in Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, and then we thought there was going to be a couple joining them. They maybe don't join them as highly, and you'll see them slide a little bit. But I say there is plenty of time, and if someone, we've slagged Will Levis and Anthony Richardson off there, but if Will Levis did come out, if an NFL team took an absolute flyer and said we're going to turn him into the next Josh Allen, that wouldn't shock me either. So he probably would go highly if he declared. Whether he should or not is debatable.
There we go. Thank you, chaps. So we've covered a few rise and fallers there. How about we do some that aren't quarterbacks? Start on the positive, some players who've impressed you. And kick us off. Someone who's risen up your board.
Okay, so me and Stu haven't discussed this, so we'll see if we've got some crossover. And I'm just looking through my list and seeing if I can maybe nab one away from Stu. I think that he'll be taking. I'm going to go for one who I think that Stu will have quite highly on his list, and I'm going to go for Olu Fashanu, who is a tackle from Penn State. This tackle class, we spoke about it in the summer as well. There isn't that guy in there that you were willing to bank on. So no runaway player really in what has continued to develop into quite an underwhelming class. And he is one who really is making a push. He's long, he's tall, strong. He's got really all the intangibles that you would want, and he's also putting the tape together at this point. He's moving guys around for fun in the run game, and he's been really impressive in the passing game as well, where he's been really secure, hasn't let much pressure at all. More polished than you'd expect. Just 5 games into his college career, only a sophomore. Just a really great athlete at the position, but he's also putting the tape together, and I think NFL teams will really like him. He's a name that we definitely should get to know if he does declare and he does come out. I think he would go quite highly if he continues to put on tape what he is at the moment, and saying where there's no standout guys, he could be the one that does end up standing out and the one that we end up talking the most about.
Yeah, and obviously spend too much time talking to each other because he is my number one on that list of players who are rising up boards. And the fact he's an offensive lineman should have given the game away on that one as well. He's been really dominant this year. I mean, he's dominant. He's been dominant against Ohio when they played them, Purdue and Auburn. He dominated a guy called Derek Hall, who's a guy who's well fancied at times. He's tall. He's got a big frame, but he's got a good balance of weight. He's not too top heavy. He's a good in the short area movements, but he's got great quickness off the line. I like when he's getting upfield. He's not one of these tackles who lumbers up the field. He seems to bound and stride up the field, so he's got a nice lightness on his feet there as well. He's very, very powerful. He uses leverage well. He's got good flexibility. His handwork's pretty advanced for a guy who's just 20. He's going to turn 21, I think, in December. The only criticism, sometimes he can be a little bit upright. He could just lower himself a little bit. That tends to be his downfall. But for a guy who's just at that age, he's played so little football, he looks really, really polished. Come April time, if he's my OT1, I won't be surprised. The only thing is he going to declare? If he keeps going the way that he is, why not? Make hay while the sun shines, as they say, with that. And the other thing as well, he's apparently just a good dude. He volunteers at a homeless shelter daily. He's a team leader. Just all those kind of things that yes, it's not the best thing in the football world, but I like to see good dudes doing well.
Yeah, I just want to tag another name onto there because it's just another Penn State guy that I just want to mention briefly, which is Joey Porter, who is a cornerback, say, at Penn State. And he's maybe in that second level of guys, of cornerbacks coming into the season, who has continued to improve week on week and is now firmly in that discussion. Predominantly a press corner, just really physical, already has 10 pass deflections on the year. Would be nice to see him turn some of them into some interceptions at some point. But yeah, he's a player that's really turned up in 2020 that we'll be looking at as maybe an early day 2 pick.
Whilst we're on the topic of corners, one of my guys I thought I had in the corners was a guy that I kind of didn't really see much in the summer, but I was quite high, which was Garrett Williams from Syracuse. He's another guy who's really disruptive. He plays better probably as a zone coverage corner than a man. He's got good movement skills. He's really reactive. He's really physical, finishes well. He's a high school track athlete, so he's got plenty of pace about him. I think he's one to watch in this cornerback class as well. When some of the top guys, we might come on to them later on, haven't really shown what they could. He was a guy that I wasn't really so familiar with this summer. I think you had him in your top 5, Owen. Was I right?
Yeah, I had him at 4.
Yeah. I mean, he's really impressed me this year. So I think he'll be a guy in this cornerback group that teams will be looking at closely.
Yeah, he's just a really smooth athlete, quite fluid, tracks the ball really nicely, and is I wouldn't say he was overly physical, but he sticks with receivers during the route, which is really good. So you've got the movement skills, and kind of when you're evaluating cornerbacks early, just having those athletic traits does really help before they start putting things on tape. But yeah, it's really nice to see. Syracuse have been a really good team so far, and we had a few Syracuse players jotting about in top 5s and in top 50 big boards, and yeah, they've proved their worth so far.
Okay, another guy who's been really impressive and is a guy who, again, has been somebody who's struggled with injuries, but has kind of come a bit of bounce back, is Mo Ibrahim, the running back from Minnesota. He has been running at a great rate, about 6.5 yards per attempt. He'd scored 8 touchdowns. Injuries is his big concern, and he is going to be an older prospect when he's coming out as well. But I think at running back, am I so concerned about being somebody old? Not really. If you get 3-4 years out of them, then chuck them and move on to the next one. That seems to be some teams' philosophies as well. He's a really hard runner. He's not much in the passing game as yet, but it's just nice to have seen him. He was somebody who's talked about a year or two ago as being a really nice prospect. He's just been really hampered by injuries. He's had a bit of a bounce back here. I know that he was a bit of a question mark for their last game as well, but he's a guy that if teams are looking for someone to run the ball and short yards who can make things happen and aren't too worried about age, Mo Ibrahim from Minnesota's had a nice year.
Yeah, he didn't play in the last game, and I think he's doubtful for the next. But yeah, he played 4 games, over 100 yards in all 4 of those games, 8 touchdowns. Yeah, really nice to see him back on the field, and yeah, I can absolutely see someone take a flyer to him because he's the type of running back that you would just run to the ground and let go after their rookie contract. He's just that type of that's the type of mold that he's in. But if you can get that type of production out of him, and say, he is a senior, so he will be coming out this year. But yeah, I think he will be taken. I don't think you're going to be speaking about him at the top of the class just because of the injury history, but he will definitely get drafted, and he'll be good for 4 or 5 years.
Who else have we got on the list?
Let's have a look. So
I've got 1 or 2 more.
Yeah, I've got. I think there's plenty more. We can go forever. Yeah, I might revert. I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball. I want to speak about Drew Sanders, who is a linebacker from Arkansas. He's a junior. He was at Alabama for 2 seasons, and then transferred to Arkansas this off season, and is now really starting to display his talent. He's just been an absolute star for that defense at Arkansas, and passes the eye test really well. I watched the full game against Alabama this weekend, and he was just everywhere. He really stood out even against that really good Alabama team. Has production also. He's just a player who's tough. He's physical. He'll happily run you over. He's really good at rushing the passer, which really stands out. 6.5 sacks on the year in just 5 games. Which is really good. He only had 1 in his previous 2 seasons at Alabama, which probably just shows you the step that he's taken this year. 2 forced fumbles as well. He's just everywhere. As they played against Alabama this weekend, really stood his ground against what will be NFL competition. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where he could go from here, because if he can end the season with some really good tape and some really good production, then that'll suit him really well. And as a junior, this is the year for him to break out and potentially enter the NFL.
He's one of those kind of linebackers who you just seem to see on every play. Yeah. He's always doing something. And whether that's causing a bit of disruption, chasing down somebody, making that tackle, you see his number on every. He doesn't seem to take a play off. Is what I'm trying to get at. He goes sideline to sideline. He's really good coming downhill as well. He disrupts the passer. He's just got a bit of energy about him. I don't think he's elite at one thing, but I think he's just a really well-rounded player. He's He's a bit of good at most things. He's going to be kind of putting you as that 7, 8 out of 10 kind of guy every week. He's not going to let you down. Is he going to be the most wonderful, explosive player? That he's not going to be a Micah Parsons type linebacker, but a guy who's just solid day in, day out, down in, down out. I think that that he's that type of guy. I'm going to touch on a Rashee Rice from SMU, wide receiver. So he's a guy we've seen a lot of small, twitchy receivers recently. He's not. He's a 6'2" guy. He really plays on the outside. He's really good in the jump ball situation. But what really impressed me is the fact that he's not just I don't think he's just a jump ball guy. He's got an ability to separate and find space, which I think is something we've talked about previously, something you really look for in receivers, that ability to separate and create that space for themselves. And he does that really quite well compared to some of the bigger guys who you're just going to throw it up and catch it. Is he in the outstanding caliber of some of the guys we've talked about in the past? No, but I think he's just a really fun player who teams will like, and he's going to find his way into an offense and find a lot of the ball when his time comes.
Yeah, he's not a player that I've watched a lot of, I must say. I see a lot of people raving about him, so I must add him to the list. But what I have seen from him is he's just going to be one of those people that is just a dependable receiver that you'll see go on day 3, who just will be able to do a job and continue to be on a team and continue to get production. It's just that type of player that he's just going to be able to get the ball, and he'll just have a 10-year career and come out of it with really nice production and a bit of money as well.
Yeah, I think he's one of these guys that when a quarterback is stuck for an option, he's going to find himself free, and it might not be a 30-yard gain or a running down but it's going to be that one that's either going to be get them in 3rd and short or just going to get that first down most of the time. And I think those kind of guys are valuable to teams as well, to have that out option.
Yeah, I think Dane Brugler from The Athletic had him as the top-rated senior wide receiver coming into the season. So clearly had some pedigree, and clearly a guy that we need to be watching a bit more of. I'm going to go to a pass catcher, but to a tight end, and I'm going to go with Darnell Washington from Georgia, who is an absolute freak. So he was my tight end 5 at the start of the year, but he has been so good. What really stood out before the season was just his pure blocking ability. That really stood out, that he was going to be that inline blocker and would be able to stay on the field doing that. But he's really stood out as a pass catcher this year. So he's been a great safety blanket for Stetson Bennett, who's the quarterback at Georgia. And so he really stepped up to be that, and just completely freaky and really unique as a player. 6'7", 265 pounds. Stupidly athletic for someone that size. His mobility is just fantastic as well. So when you can block in line the way that he can, and then flex out to be a pass catching option, just absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I think right now, I think he would be one of the top tight ends that do get drafted, simply because of that size, strength profile that he has, and now being able to add some pass catching and some yards after catch ability as well. 10 receptions, 184 yards on the year. That's already his best season. He's only played 5 games. So really stood out, and if he continues this, then yeah, I can see him being a day 2 pick that someone's going to take and really like him, because he can simply do it all.
I don't have much notes on him, but I do have some notes, and what I've written is, if Owen talks about him, use your one word: beast.
Yeah.
he's just an absolute monster, and yeah, he's just fun. There's some players you just watch, and yeah, they're not the best player in it, but they're just fun to watch, and him having the ball in his hands, running with it's just fun. It's in a team that already has a tight end, which we're not going to talk about this year. Can't really. He still manages to shine. So I think that's fair play to him.
Should we mention him now? I think he was going to be on our fallers list, wasn't he? We might as well mention him now. That I think we're speaking about Eric Gilbert here, who we got completely wrong. At this point, you can't even consider him to be a draft prospect. So if you've got a report somewhere, bank it, save it for next year, because he's clearly got some personal things still going on. We thought that they were sorted. Obviously not. Kirby Smart, who's the Georgia head coach, come out and said that he just still needs to build trust with the guys around him, and there's just guys he trusts more. And he didn't make the journey to South Carolina when they played there away, which is probably a bit telling. So yeah, he wasn't as ready as we thought he'd be. So should we put that on him? Put on us? I don't know. We'll say it's us. We put too much pressure on the guy.
I'm sure I'd be very disappointed.
Yeah, just another quick name. I think we've talked about plenty of prospects here. A guy just maybe to keep an eye out for. Haven't seen as much as I want to of him, but it's Tyree Wilson, the pass rusher from Texas Tech. He's a guy with a lot of upside. He's got loads of traits that you'd love on that outside rush guy. Starting to put it a bit together, and I think as the season goes on, if we see more and more of him, he might be a name that people start talking a little bit more about, and getting a bit more excited about what he could do at the next level.
Yeah, he's really nice, and he's just going to keep rolling that. So he's be a draft stock. He's going to be one that you could continue adding to the stock up list, because that's just the type of player he is. If you end up hearing his name at the back end of round one discussion in 6 months' time, I wouldn't bank against that, because he's one that people thought could take the next step. It hasn't in the last 4 or 5 weeks, but it's starting to then roll on that draft stock, and I do think he'll be able to take that leap, because he does have a lot of traits, and he's just really bulky and strong, which is also probably more, I would say, like a true defensive end rather than a pure edge. So a player that can do a bit of everything. I don't have a player as such, just to round things off here. I just wanted to speak about a certain class, just to lump everyone in together. I just wanted to say that this running back class is as good as we advertised it. This could be that as good as we could have hoped for, and could end up being one of the better running back classes we've seen in some time. You genuinely could put 9 or 10 guys into a top 5. The class really has been that good. Bijan Robinson obviously headlines the class and still a standout guy, but Jahmyr Gibbs has been superb after transferring from Georgia Tech to Alabama. Zach Evans transferred from TCU to Ole Miss. He's been awesome, really improved. He was outside of my top 5 going into the season, but has answered a lot of the questions transferring over. Blake Quorum has been on an absolute tear after the summer, which you absolutely love to see. So there's a lot of guys who are going to be very, very good. So you're going to see a lot of these guys this time next year in the NFL bagging your team touchdowns, because the class is extremely, extremely good.
Yeah, and for listeners of the pod over the last few years, they'll know I hate conceding something to Owain, as we've had a few disagreements about things over the year, but I've had to give him Blake Corum on this one at the summer one. I didn't see it as much as Owain did, quite wrongly on my part. Hands up on that one. He's been on an absolute shredding mission to start off the season, and if he continues the way he is, yeah, teams are going to absolutely love Blake Corum. I think it was maybe just his height and things. I don't know. I think that's maybe what put me on. I don't know what it was. I'm happy to admit I've made a big mistake on not rating him as highly as Owain did there, but he's been really impressive, and he's been probably the one guy for me that's really stood out. That's went, oh yeah, he is. We knew Bijan was going to be good. Probably knew Jahmyr Gibbs was going to be good. I didn't expect Blake Corum to be as good as he has been.
I love it when a plan comes together. So there's absolutely nothing finer doing this than when you're doing your draft analysis, and when you're much higher on a guy, not only Stu, but higher on him than
mostly me
on him than a lot of people. And you put pen to paper and you're right. Yeah, you trust your eyes and you go with it. There's nothing finer than when that pays off. We brush over it when it doesn't, and a lot of the time, most of the time, it doesn't. But when it does, I'm absolutely going to take that to the bank. So yeah, he's listeners and watchers should definitely be paying attention to Blake Corum. If you don't know Blake Corum by now, then where have you been? Because he's been on an absolute tear this season. Yeah, so it's paid off. So yeah, I'm taking that.
Good. So very, very honest of you there, Stu, as well. Eating that big chunk of humble pie there.
It don't happen often, so don't get used to it, guys.
Yeah, you'll expect it in return if there's one that Owain's missed. Anyway, let's move on. We've had the rises, but there's got to be some fallers too. So who's struggled so far this year?
I don't have a lot on this list just because of how early we are. We're almost halfway through the college season, but there's still plenty of time to go in terms of through the draft process. But the one player that I did want to mention properly is just where is Kayshon Boutte, because he is absolutely disappeared now. I suppose little caveat here: LSU they just cannot pass the ball to save their lives, so he's on the sideline most of the time. They're just bashing the run game, and to be fair, they're winning some games doing that. But that's only going to take you so far into the season. At some point, you're going to have to start throwing the ball. And there's no touchdowns on the year for Boutte. Longest attempt, believe it or not, came 2 weeks ago against Southern, which was a rush for 41 yards. That isn't how you should be using one of the best receivers in college football. No touchdowns, or 11 receptions through 5 games, 97 yards. Longest catch was 21. You're talking about one of the better deep threats in college football, and one of the guys who said that if you're going to bet on traits and production, then he was one of the guys that should have been wide receiver one going into the year. So is it him? Is it Brian Kelly, or is it the LSU offense? I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of everything, but it's just LSU aren't throwing the ball to him. So he is someone where we were speaking about potentially being a top 15 pick. It's very difficult to see that happening on the current trajectory of just 11 receptions in 5 games.
Yeah, and wide receiver is a position that you've really got to produce at as well, to be, because there's so many guys, and all it takes is a few of them to have a really good season, which plenty are, and he just gets overtaken very, very quickly if you're not seeing the ball. It's difficult to see how teams are going to be thinking, well, if you've got that good a receiver, why aren't they throwing it at him? Is it because they can't? Probably. Is it because they don't trust him to do what they want him to do? I don't know. It's just a very odd situation, and it just doesn't sit quite right with me about what's going on with Kayshon Boutte. Particularly, I was very high on him. I thought he was going to have a real breakout season. He was in that bunch of we always had that 3 that we were talking about, and how do you separate them out? Well, Boutte's easily separated himself from that pack, and not in the way we would have hoped for him. Still a bit of the season to go, and hopefully it's a situation at LSU rather than the player.
Yep.
Another one I just wanted to touch on that we've been a lot of talk about, and we've not really seen much of him. I don't know, has there been I can't really see if there's been much of a major injury issue, but Eli Rex hasn't really been seen much of the field for Alabama. He played in the whatever game it was when they absolutely walloped. I can't remember, who did they whack? What was the score? Can't remember who it was anyway. He's just not really been involved in anything very much. He's somebody who, with a transfer over, there've been issues kind of in that transfer. He'd been arrested for things and whatnot. And is it going to be one of those seasons where it's a write-off? I don't know. He was somebody we thought of really highly, but I can't really see much information about what's been happening with him, if I'm honest.
He just hasn't been able to get on the field. I think, don't hold me to this, but I'm sure I saw someone tweet out, and would probably an Alabama beat writer a couple of days ago, saying that there were 7 other Alabama DBs that had played more snaps than Eli Rex. Only featured in one game. That game you're talking about there, Stu, is Utah State, that they won 55-0, and he had 2 total tackles and
he did
else.
nothing. I mean, I'd wondered, had there been an injury, but I couldn't find anything to say he'd been injured.
No.
I've wondered, had there been something off-field concerns? There was some kind of in the summer, but nothing really. I just think, has he just not been doing well enough to get on the field, which is a concern for somebody who we had pinned as being a high hope. So he's somebody maybe just keep an eye out for in the second half of the season. Does he kick on and do well, or is it just going to all fade away for him?
It is worrying because of who he plays for as well, in Nick Saban, who has so many ties to the NFL. If, head coaches, GMs speak to Nick Saban and, maybe get some intel and say, well, look, if he can't get into a Nick Saban team, then he's not going to get into our NFL team either. So he could be one. I mean, he absolutely has first round traits. I mean, if you're going to put a mock draft together, then I spoke earlier about Garrett Williams saying that athletic traits is you do bank on that a lot at the cornerback position. But Eli Rex just has all that measurables, prototypical cornerback, but just hasn't had the production. It was slow, I think, was the only knock on him coming through the summer, but had high pedigree all the way through his career. Came from IMG Academy, who just churn out NFL players. Was at LSU, then goes to Alabama, and just hasn't been able to dominate in the way that he should have. Do you have any other names on your list, Stu? Because I'm out there.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered pretty much everybody I was going to talk about. So yeah, I think we've won through quite a few guys there. There's plenty for people to go and have a look at and mull over till we're back next time.
We don't want to slander guys too much.
No,
we'll see.
Not slandering. It's just seeing who's maybe just not lived up to what we thought, rather than slander.
Yeah, rather than fall in, just have slightly underwhelmed.
Cool. Well, next time we'll do rises, fallers, and slightly overwhelmed. Yeah, it's been okay.
Very polite way of saying things.
Yeah. No, that's
we'll get worse later on.
Yeah. Well, anyway, based on that, most of your top fives are out the window from what I've seen. So
yeah, usually happens.
To recap later on.
Yeah, it's a constantly evolving process, is what I like to say, rather than a finished article in the summer.
Absolutely, it's a live beast, is what it is. Well, there we go. Thanks for joining us for our very special YouTube first extravaganza. As mentioned, if you can check that out, like and subscribe as well, that would be fantastic. And of course, as always, have a look at our Twitter at 99yards, the website 99yards.com. Loads of scouting reports, stuff on college, NFL, even CFL, loads of great stuff on there too. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back in a few weeks' time.